There is a podcast that lies between the imagination of two simple-minded earthlings. Travel with these two longtime friends, Jimbo and 80s E, as they attempt to explore the fifth dimension. Follow along with them as they take the key and unlock the door to the vast space between shadow and substance. This podcast is one of trivia, of insight, and of sounds and ideas from one of the greatest television shows ever produced. You are embarking on a timeless journey. There is your signpost up ahead. You are entering the tragedy of cinema's Twilight Zone.
Portrait of a man who thinks and thereby gets things done. Mr. Jimbo Cobb might be called a prime mover, a talent which has to be seen to be believed. In just a moment, he'll show his friends and you how he keeps both feet on the ground and his head in the Twilight Zone.
All right, guys, welcome back to the Tragedy of Cinema podcast, the Twilight Zone series. I'm your host, Jimbo, and joined again by my co-host,
80s ESP, here with all of his telekinetic powers to help you dive down into the fifth dimension.
Oh, no, he's going to be in rare form today, ladies and gentlemen. I can already tell. The way he's talking and the day I've had, this could be a really crazy episode, is all I'm saying.
Crazy bad, maybe.
So today we are talking about The Prime Mover, which is episode 21 of season 2 of The Twilight Zone. We just talked earlier. It's coming to a close of season 2. Just a handful of episodes left, probably. So, Eric, what's your thoughts on season 2 so far before we dive into this episode? Do you like it better than season 1?
I think so. I mean, I don't know. It's kind of like saying which one of your kids do you like better. I mean, I like season 1 for totally different reasons probably than I like season 2, but I don't know. We kind of went through a thin stretch here in season 2, but we're about to hit a really good pace towards the end. There are some really good episodes. Bang, 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 one after another, in my opinion, but we'll get there eventually.
Yeah, because this is not one of them.
Right,
let me just say that off the record. So
okay.
I'm sure we'll have a different opinion on this one like we do almost every episode we do. So, Eric, let's go ahead and take away The Prime Mover.
All right, The Prime Mover. This is the Twilight Zone season number 2, episode number 21, and it was directed by Richard L. Baer, and the writing credits go to Charles Beaumont for this particular episode. But however, I think Jimbo's got some information. I'll throw it to him. The story is originally uncredited. It was originally written by George Clayton Johnson, but he is uncredited, and I think Jimbo's got some info regarding that situation.
Right, but before we do that, let me ask you a question, Eric. How many Twilight Zone stories did Charles Beaumont actually write? Do you know?
I don't know that off the top of my head. No,
because his name keeps coming up a lot.
Right.
Season 1 and season 2, so
yeah.
Maybe that's something we can dive in and find out.
You know, I do. I do know that I don't think he might have written an episode in season number 3, but I think his writing credits are primarily in the first 2 seasons, and then they just stop. I don't think he really contributed much towards the end of the last 3 seasons or whatever.
Well, we need to do some research on him. That'd probably be a good little mini episode. So this is, of course, from my trusty companion book, The Twilight Zone Companion, 3rd edition, which is expanded and revised by Mark Scott Zicree. I think everybody should purchase this book. It's got a lot of interesting information in it about the Twilight Zone, especially if you're a fan. So based on the credits, one would assume that The Prime Mover was an original piece written entirely by Charles Beaumont. Actually, this engaging script was based on an unpublished story by George Clayton Johnson. Explains Johnson, quote, Charles Beaumont could get an assignment. He needed a story, and he didn't have a story, so none of his stories seemed suitable. He therefore bought from me my story. He paid me $600 for it. My name never ended up on the screen. It was an accident of production for which Buck Houghton apologized. I felt bad that my name wasn't on it, but I thought it was a good show. In adapting the story, Beaumont retained Johnson's basic plot, but added a love interest in a Chicago gangster named Phil Nolan, a Beaumont in-joke on his friend William F. Nolan. In the original, the pair simply make their winnings at various local floating crap games, but Beaumont rightfully conceived that place the action in Las Vegas would add a greater dramatic tension. As for the two central characters, they remain the same. A Mutt and Jeff pair. Dane Clark, nervous and quick-tempered, and also Buddy Epson, slow and infinitely calm. So there you have my little section from my trusty companion.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting, too. I got some trivia. We'll get to it later. Beaumont was actually paid rather handsomely, too, for the actual story, so it was quite a steal to buy that story off of George Clayton Johnson for only $600, considering what he actually made for the episode. But back to more of our basic info here on this particular episode. The original air date for this episode was March the 24th, 1961, and you know what time it is now? It's time for our favorite segment in the episode, the thing we like to call On This Day in History. Okay, so on this day in TV and film history for March 24th, and man, it's a pretty good one. All right, in 1935, this should harken our minds back to the last episode that we did. 1935, Major Bowes, an original amateur hour, goes national on NBC Radio Network. So Major Bowes, that was referenced in the episode Static that we did last time. 1939 for March 24th, Wuthering Heights, a film based on Emily Bronte novel directed by William Wyler and starring Merle Oberon and Laurence Olivier, premieres in Los Angeles. And here's one just for Jimbo. 1991, WrestleMania 7 in LA Memorial Sports Arena featured Hulk Hogan, and he beat Sergeant Slaughter for the WWF heavyweight title. So that's on the TV.
That's
side.
right. Yeah. Hulkamania running wild, baby.
I knew you'd like that one. In 1999, The Matrix, a film directed by I can't even pronounce that name, Wakasis. I'm going to butcher that. It starred Keanu Reeves and Lawrence Fishburne and Carrie Ann Moss. It premiered in 1999. And then finally, one of my favorites, and I think Jimbo's favorites too, in 2005, on March 24th, the U.S. version of The Office, created by Ricky Gervais, Stephen Merchant, developed by Greg Daniels, starring Steve Carell and John Krasinski, premieres on NBC. That's 2005. So that concludes this day in history. Our total production cost for our Twilight Zone episode comes in at $51,327.47. And so it's an average episode, average filmography. This isn't a recorded videotaped episode. This is a regular episode. So when we adjust that for inflation, we're looking at $516,433.31. So again, it comes in around $500,000 to produce this episode. Still would be a steal in today's dollars. You couldn't probably produce 10 minutes of any kind of television show for $500,000. I have a few dates. Dates for rehearsal were September the 12th and September the 13th of 1960. The dates for filming for this episode were September 14, 15, and 16, 1960. And with those basic information, basic facts, I'm going to throw it to Jimbo for the cast of this episode.
All right, we have a slightly larger cast than normal. Two main characters, pretty much, and their shenanigans. So we have Dane Clark, who played Ace Larson. You know, you thought with a name like Ace, they wouldn't be at the crap table, they'd be at the card table, but that's just me. He was in a movie called Moonrise in 1948. You have the legendary Buddy Epson playing Jimbo Cobb, no relation to me, but Jimbo, gotta love that name.
Yeah.
He's probably most famous for his role as Old Jed's a Millionaire in the Beverly Hillbillies as Jed Clampett. And also a movie that we covered, I do believe Eric may have been a part of it. I don't remember. I know he wanted to be, but Breakfast at Tiffany's, where he played Doc Gollity. Great movie. We also had Christine White playing Kitty Cavanaugh. She was in Magnum Force in 1973. You had Nedson Booth playing Big Phil Nolan. He was in The Greatest Story Ever Told. It's around Easter time, so I thought I'd throw that in there. But he was uncredited for his role in that. You had Clancy Cooper, was the trucker. He was in The Wild North in 1952. Jane Burgess played Sheila. Is that the cigar lady or whatever?
Yeah.
Yeah. She was something else in this too. You had William Keane, who was the desk clerk, uncredited. He's been in lots of TV shows, including Little House on the Prairie, probably one of Eric's favorite, Mayberry, RFD, and Lassie. I know it's not as good as give me the thumbs down. You had Robert Reardon, who was the hotel manager. He was in The Destructors in 1968. You had Joe Scott as the Crooper. He was in Peter Gunn in 1958. And yes, you had the great, legendary Rod Serling as himself, the narrator and the host for The Twilight Zone.
All right.
So, Eric, that is your little cast for Prime Mover.
All right. Just for reference, Mayberry, RFD, anything in color with the Andy Griffith Show, it just goes downhill once they went to color. So RFD is like the worst of the worst for all you Andy Griffith fans out there. Probably would align with me on that. So let's give you the plot for this episode. Ace Larson owns a roadside diner. It's a dreary existence for him, his girlfriend Kitty Cavanaugh, and his friend and employee Jimbo Cobb. Through a serious accident just outside his diner, Ace learns for the first time that Jimbo has telekinetic powers. Okay, first question. Do you think Jimbo and Ace have been friends for a long time? Are they like lifelong friends? I know it doesn't really say. But so
I don't know if they've been lifelong friends. I do believe that they've probably worked together for a while.
Okay. I think that's probably a good explanation, too. Otherwise, if they had been friends for a long time, and this is the first time he's becoming aware, that's Ace, becoming aware that Jimbo has his power, I just don't see that happening. Just because Jimbo says that he's been able to do it since he was a little kid. And so, anyway,
Yeah, but I also think that maybe he hasn't had to use his power because it's pretty much a small town. You don't really see many people in this episode. You don't see much vehicular traffic or anything. So maybe it's just like a little roadside diner that people stop every once in a while.
Yeah. But
I will say this, that car crash is probably the best special effect that they have done in the Twilight Zone so far.
And they didn't even do it themselves. We'll get
right. It's reused footage, right?
Yeah.
But I'm just saying.
Yeah. So we've kind of come to the conclusion that Ace and Jimbo have become co-workers and then friends through working together. So Ace, the gambler, sees an easy way to make his fortune, and the three of them set out for Las Vegas. Jimbo has little trouble making the roulette balls fall onto the right number or making any point with a pair of dice. Ace learns the hard way, however, that there can be too much of a good thing. So the opening of the episode, we'll just go ahead and jump right in. We start out at the Happy Days Cafe here in the episode's beginning.
Is that Sunday, Monday Happy Days?
I don't know. It's spelled D-A-Z-E. I think it's right in the opening. When we pan down, it's on the window, and we discover our main character, one of our main characters, Ace, and he's talking and coaxing a slot machine. And Jimbo,
which is the same slot machine from one of the season one's The Fever, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, exactly. I'm sure you picked up on that. So Ace is saying, okay, well, I think it's about time you started paying off. And he's, getting frustrated because he's dropping the coin in and he's losing every time he pulls the handle. So Ace loses and he walks over to the counter and he asks Kitty for a quarter so that he can play again. Basically, he wants to keep playing. So he's taking money out of the cash register, I guess. And when he's over at the counter, he makes a bet with one of the patrons, a trucker. And Ace says to the trucker, I'll flip you, double or nothing for your meal. What do you say? And so the bet is made, the coin is flipped, and the trucker calls heads. And he wins. And he says, heads, thanks. That's a lucky quarter. You mind if I borrow it? So then this is the funny part. Then the trucker proceeds to take the same quarter and drop it in the slot machine, pull the handle, and hit the jackpot right after Ace, finished. That was kind of funny. So Ace is beside himself, at this point, and he exclaims, "It ain't fair, Jimbo. It ain't fair." And then that's when we meet Jimbo. I think he's like sweeping the counter or something, or sweeping the floor or cleaning the counter. And Kitty says she's going home. And then she, kind of gives this explanation. Well, I can't, you find out that later that they're together. And she says, well, I can't quit because you owe me 3 months, salary.
I thought that was pretty funny too.
Right. I can't quit. And so
do you think he's gambled away her salary?
I mean, that would be a good explanation of why, they always seem to be broke and he's falling on hard times. So she leaves, and her parting words to her coworkers are, "Good night, big time operators." So Ace and Jimbo are left inside the diner, and I kind of broke this episode down, kind of with the scenes. We have the Happy Days Cafe, and then we move to the outside, and we see the car crash that we just referenced earlier. Outside, the car skids, and it flips, and it crashes into an electrical, transformer thing. And that's stock footage from a movie called Thunder Road from, 1957, I think. I don't know, Jimbo, you can check me on that. But there are two people inside, which you really can't see the two people inside again because it's stock footage. So Ace frantically, yells at Jimbo. He says, "Come on, Jimbo, come on, help me, lend a hand." So Jimbo closes his eyes tightly, and he concentrates, and miraculously the car rolls over. And so Jimbo Cobb somehow moved a car with his mind. And that's the conclusion that we come to. And then Rod enters the scene, and he gives his narration. So then our third movement, we're back in the back room of the Happy Days Cafe. It seems as though Jimbo and Ace sort of live in a back room of the cafe. And Ace enters, and he says, the doc says it'll just be a few broken bones. There's nothing serious to the, regarding the people that were in the accident. And so Ace desperately wants to know how Jimbo has pulled off this amazing, this whole business of the car turning right side up. He wants it to break him down for him. He wants to understand how Jimbo was able to do that. And so Jimbo explains that the power to move things around by thinking, he's been able to do it. He doesn't think it's anything special. There's really nothing special about it. He thought everyone could do it. And Ace asks him, well, how long have you been able to do it? And he says, well, since always. He thought it was like breathing. He thought everybody could do it and that it wasn't a big deal. So then Jimbo goes on to say that he had to give it up because he got in trouble in school a lot because of it. And he used to get awful headaches. And that's one key thing, that whenever he performs this act, right, he always gets a really bad migraine headache, which not only does he share your name, this character shares your name, unfortunately,
and
shares
migraines.
He shares the migraine situation like you do. That's nothing fun to deal with for sure. So he always gets a headache whenever he performs his telekinetic powers, and shortly thereafter. So Ace, he sees an opportunity. Of course, he's always opportunistic. He wants Jimbo to demonstrate this again for him, and he wants to do it right now. And so Jimbo obliges, and he moves, and the first thing he does is lifts the bed with his mind. And I think let me give you a rundown of Jimbo's kinetic powers. I'll just give them to you all up front, and then we'll work our way through. He moves the car first, obviously. He lifts the bed. He flips a quarter. He rolls the dice to whatever Ace needs him to win. He moves the phone in the episode. He hits on the roulette wheel number every time. And at the end of the episode, when you think that his powers have mysteriously vanished, he lifts the broom at the very end of the episode. So, anything, Jimbo? I think you mentioned something about the quarter. And
yeah, first of all, let me say this. You ever thought about that name, Happy Days, that Ace gets happy when he wins all the money and Jimbo gets the days because of his headaches? I just thought that just hit me. I thought that was pretty funny.
Yeah.
But I posed this question to Eric. You see him lift the car.
Mm-hmm.
You see him lift the bed. You see him flip a quarter. You see him move a phone. All of these things have been standing still.
Yeah, stationary objects, yeah.
Right. So you come to find out in the episode that when they go to the roulette wheel and they go to the dice throwing, that basically Jimbo just basically either cocks his head a little bit or something, and it ends up going onto the number before it even lands on the table or even lands in the roulette wheel. I posed the question to Eric, as being a prime mover, in order to move something, does it have to be stationary?
Yeah.
Because all of his powers up to this point, it had to be standing still.
Right.
Even the broom at the end had to be standing still. So that to me kind of just, I don't know. Maybe I'm making too much of it, but it just kind of really bugged me, I guess, in this episode.
Well, let's get a little definition of a prime mover, and there are multiple definitions that span scientific, but this is just one that I wrote down. It refers to the propulsion unit for a transportation system such as a locomotive or a train. The tractor trailer of a semi-tractor trailer, a la Optimus Prime from the Transformers. The motor on a locomotive or railroad engine, or the truck that tows an artillery gun. Also in philosophy, now this is where the definition sort of splinters a little bit, it is a self-caused being that is the cause of all things. So the prime mover is someone who... I would kind of agree with, I understand what you're saying. He is someone who moves something through propulsion, which happens to be a stationary object, at least from what limited definition that I can give. And I understand what you're saying. He's saying part of the episode, he's able to move things that are stationary, and then other parts of the episode, he's moving things that are already in motion. So, I mean, we could go down that physics rabbit hole for an hour probably and end up nowhere, but yeah, I thought that was interesting that you brought that up, that, that difference in the episode where sometimes he's moving things stationary, sometimes he's moving things that are already in motion. So back to our episode, let's jump back in. And so once Jimbo demonstrates that he can flip the coin and that he's been able to do it since always, and he obliges and he lifts the bed and he flips the coin, Ace, a little light bulb goes off in his head, right? He's like, okay, I've got an idea. So he calls up Kitty on the phone and he says, can you be ready in like 15 minutes? Like, we're out of here. So he has this genius idea. And then we come to understand that his idea is they're going to go to Las Vegas. And so that sets the next scene. The scene is inside the casino. So Ace and Jimbo, the first thing that they play is they hit on the roulette wheel again, and they're at the roulette table for a while, and Jimbo sort of like Jimbo said, Jimbo, he shakes his head, and the numbers hit, and then I think from there they hit on some type of Ferris wheel type game. I'm not quite sure what that game was. And then they end up at the craps table, and then Ace is rolling 7s. He's winning. And then they come to another dice game, which I had to look this up because I had never seen it before. And the game is called Chuck-a-Luck, or it's also called Sweet Cloth. And it's a dice game of medieval origin that is related to Grand Hazard. I don't know what Grand Hazard is. I didn't go down that deep. It basically is played with 3 dice and a layout numbered from 1 to 6 upon which the players place their bet. The banker then rolls the dice by turning over an hourglass-shaped wire cage in which they are contained. The payoffs are usually 1-to-1 on singles, 2-to-1 on pairs, 3-to-1 on triples that are appearing on the dice. For example, if a player places a bet on 6 and 2 6s appear on the dice, the player is paid off 2-to-1. So the game can be found in some American and European casinos and gambling houses. And it goes on to say the house edge for mathematical advantages averages around 7.5%. So your mathematical advantage for that game, Chuck-a-Luck, is about 7.5%. I had never seen that game before. I thought it was a super old game, so I had to figure out what that was. So after Chuck-a-Luck, Jimbo says, man, my head is killing me. We got to stop. Like, he's got a super bad headache. So
right, but I think what you're missing right now is it's not just one casino they've been at. They've toured the city at this point. So it's, you keep seeing the different casino signs and all that. So it's not that he just went to this one casino and played these games and left. They are traveling to casino to casino to casino. So Jimbo's been doing this trick over and over and over. We come to find out that the bigger the object, the more strength and headache he gets. But I guess if you do it small ones a bunch of times, it's going to equal to do something big too. So that's when he gets wore out.
Yeah. So he's been doing this probably for days and days, maybe at this point. They were going on a real bender. So Jimbo has this horrible headache, and Ace decides he's going to cash out, and he goes to the front desk and cashes out, and Ace and Jimbo and Kitty are carrying boxes filled with their cash winnings, and they also have a bellhop that's helping them carry all their money.
Let me ask you a question.
Okay.
Who in the right mind takes a Chester drawer out and carries their money around and wide open for any thief can do? Come steal it from them, especially in the broad daylight, even in today's, not only in Las Vegas, but even where we live. If you see me walking down the street with boxes and boxes of open top money, my life will probably be threatened. It doesn't matter what time of day.
Yeah.
So I just think that was really weird. Why didn't they put them in bags or something? You know what I mean? It's just really weird to me.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it might not be too long before our cash might not be worth anything with this inflation, so we might be able to do that in the near future. So I think here is where we're first introduced to Sheila, the cigarette girl. Ace gets a pack of smokes, and he hands her, I don't know what he hands her, maybe 100. Now, was this money fake money? Was it easily detectable? Like in a lot of the other episodes, it's like Monopoly money. I didn't really go back and really take a really hard look. So he meets Sheila, and I think she can't change 100, and he says something, you don't have, who told you had to, baby? And then he walks away, and then the bellhop carries, helps them to their room or the casino suite.
That guy was older than me and you combined.
Yeah, he was an elderly gentleman. So that's the next scene. They're in the casino suite. And again, Ace tips the bellhop and smugly says, Junior, go out and buy yourself a pair of roller skates. So Jimbo, he just wants to sleep. He finds the closest bed and he wants to lay down. And he doesn't want to gamble anymore because his conscience is bothering him. And he tells Ace, it's wrong, Ace. It's cheating, and cheating's wrong. So Ace agrees with Jimbo, but he persuades him to gamble just one more time. And he says, all right, you take it easy, rest tonight, and tomorrow we'll fracture him. So their plan is at this point, like, we're going to go out and hit him hard just one more day, and then we're going to wrap it up. But Kitty, she doesn't agree, and she tries to persuade Ace to go home, and that he's already been very lucky. Like, you don't need any more. And Ace will have none of it, and he retorts back, by tomorrow I'll have enough dough to own the state. You understand that? The whole state will be Aceville, USA. So he's going for broke. And this creates the conflict in the episode, of course, because Kitty's frustrated, and she finally leaves. And Jimbo convinces Ace to go after her because, after all, I mean, Kitty is worth more than all the money in the whole world. He's a good friend, by the way. Jimbo's a good friend because he's constantly like, he's like, hey, in the beginning of the episode, he's like, hey, when are you guys going to get married? And he's like, I don't have any money. Like, Kitty deserves it. He's basically, Ace is making excuses why he doesn't want to marry her. And then, he's greedy. She calls him on it. And they have an argument, and she leaves. And she says, I'm going back home, and you can play Little Caesar if you want, but I'm going back home. I'm not dealing with this. So again, Jimbo was a good friend, and he tells her, go after her. He tells Ace, go after her. So the scene changes in they end up in the casino lobby. And so after Kitty leaves, Ace tells her he still intends to gamble tomorrow. In the lobby, they have a separate conversation, and he's like, I'm still going to gamble tomorrow. And then she leaves finally, and she's had enough, and she's upset. So then Sheila, the cigarette girl, reappears from an earlier encounter again at the front desk, and Ace basically hires Sheila she's almost like a call girl. Like, he hires her for a date, but it's 1961, right? They can't go, all right, we're going to make her a call girl. So they're very strategic about the language that they use. And he basically hires her for the night, and she's going to be his girlfriend, and they're going to hit the town.
Especially when he asked the manager if he could rent her out for the night or whatever. I was like,
Yeah, that's next. He asked the hotel manager if he can hire her as he stuffs money into his hand, and the hotel manager is like, "Oh, would it be all right?" Why, yes, I think it would be all right. And it's basically prostitution right there in 1961, and not so many words, but so then he asked the hotel manager. This is another key point. He's like, "Who's the biggest gambler in town? I want to know who the highest roller is." And the hotel manager says, Nolan, he's a guest here this week. And we come to find out that this is Phil Nolan. And so Ace tells the hotel manager, he says, well, you tell Phil Nolan that Ace wants to see him. Ace Larson, that's the name. I live here. You tell him to call me tomorrow at the hotel and bring plenty of lettuce. I mean this kind of lettuce. And he holds up a big
I thought that was funny too.
Yeah. So, he's going to try to get a game with this big high stakes gambler, the high roller, and his name is Phil Nolan. And then him and, what's her name? They go out and hit the town, the cigarette girl. So then the scene changes again, and we're back in the hotel suite. And Ace receives this floating phone call from Nolan, and they agree to a game, and Jimbo is very uneasy to learn that Nolan is a gangster from Chicago, and he says he's awful mean. And so Nolan shows up. I'm skipping ahead quickly. I'm here. He shows up. They play the high-stakes game, and Ace is beating the pants off Nolan with the help of Jimbo's kinetic powers until Ace wants to go all in, and he says, I'm going to shoot the works. And then Jimbo mysteriously blows a fuse, as he says, and Ace loses all of his dough on one roll. He went all in, all those boxes or drawers of cash. He loses it all. Nolan collects the cash, and she enters at some point, and she discovers that she's not going to Lake Mead. They had, I guess, Ace and her had plans to go to Lake Mead, and that trip got canceled because, Ace has lost all of his money. And this is what I understand. Like, this is a funny scene to me. Ace is stunned and falls back in the bed. And then Ace and Jimbo both burst into uncontrollable laughter. Because once, Jimbo says, I don't know what happened. I just blew a fuse. And then after all of his money's gone, he's just like, they just both fall back and just have a big laugh over it. So I thought that was kind of weird. This has a lot of scenes, so I think we're back in scene 7. We're back in the Lazy Days Cafe. Ace has decided he's getting rid of this old slot machine, and he proposes to Kitty. Kitty flips a coin to determine her response, and Ace calls heads, and Kitty looks at the coin, but notice this, Jimbo. She never reveals what came up. She just agrees. I wonder if she actually flipped tails, but agreed to marry him anyway, because she just kind of held her hand over it. So, and then we discover that Jimbo really didn't blow a fuse as he picks up the broom off of the floor in the very final scene, and he does it with his.
Or did he? And he just got it back.
Yeah, and I guess that would be one explanation. But I think he faked losing it, just because he wanted to teach his friend Ace a lesson about greed, and so he is the prime mover. Jimbo, any comments, questions, thought-provoking?
I think it's awful funny that Ace Larson, he wants to be known as a high gambler. He wants to be known as the talk of the town, and he makes that phone call to see who the biggest gambler is. Tell him Ace is here, and he's like, Ace. ACE, Ace. So nobody still knows who this guy is, even after he just cleaned out a bunch of bank accounts. So I thought that was pretty funny.
Yeah. His ego precedes him, definitely. Yeah. We can move on with some trivia here for this episode, and then we can give our final thoughts. It says on August the 15th, Serling admitted that he had just finished reading The Prime Mover and told Buck Houghton, "I think Beaumont's job was an excellent one, and I think the script is in nigh on to perfect shape. I hope it's been mimeoed and all is set to go. I can't think of a single criticism." In a letter to Charles Beaumont with the same date, Serling commented, "Just finished The Prime Mover, and I have simply flipped. It's a honey of a job, and I thought, considering all of the travail that exists between you and that miserable Twilight Zone, it might be a morale booster for you to know that your latest effort is a real corker." Upon Serling's insistence, Houghton sent Beaumont a generous contract for this episode. Beaumont was paid $2,000 for the script and his services. Whether it was Beaumont's involvement in securing the legal rights, or a secretarial error, or a production oversight was made, and George Clayton Johnson's name was omitted from the credits. So he got paid $2,000. Rod Serling, apparently loved the episode and didn't have any criticism, but I noticed an interesting sentence in his memo. He says, "Considering all of the travail that exists between you and the miserable Twilight Zone." I wonder if that's why we don't see why we don't see Beaumont writing any episodes in later seasons of the Twilight Zone. Maybe he just was frustrated with it and decided to quit maybe after the second or third season. But for this episode in particular, he was paid very handsomely, $2,000 for that episode. I thought that was pretty interesting. In the opening, and Jimbo already talked about this, our Jimbo, the slot machine was used by the main character. This slot machine is used in The Fever in 1960, which we've already covered. The film clip of the car crash is from the end of Thunder Road, 1958. We already talked about that at the top of the episode. This episode aired on March 24th, 1961, but the calendar on the wall in the diner is from December of 1955. Just some notes inside the episode. It says Dane Clark and Buddy Epson were the only actors on the set during the 2 days of rehearsal. Christine White was not on the set during the rehearsals. The first day of filming consisted of the Happy Days Cafe scenes, the exterior highway, filmed the outside part that they filmed for themselves, not the car crash, and the interior of the back room, where Jimbo demonstrated his mind over matter to Ace. Serling's trailer was also filmed on the morning of the first day of filming. The second day of filming consisted of the casino and the various tables, the hotel lobby, and the interior of the 5th floor suite. On the third day of filming, only a few scenes were filmed in the interior of the 5th floor of the hotel suite, where Ace loses everything to Nolan. So that just kind of gives you an outline of what was filmed on what days. I probably could have inserted that earlier in the episode. I just got a couple of goofs, which I think we've already covered. Pretty much just basic stuff, like you can see wires when Jimbo lifts the bed. At 18 minutes, you can see the money stacked on the floor has all the printing backwards, but in other shots it's normal again. So just little goofs that we kind of see, kind of consistently running throughout. But Jimbo, why don't you give me any questions or observations or overall feelings, and then I'll give mine, and we'll put this episode to bed.
All right. Literally, because I might be dazed after I give my review. So, to me, maybe it's just because I watched it again before we recorded. Maybe it's just the day I'm having, but I did not like this episode at all. I think it's probably one of the lowest ones I've ever watched. I don't need to see Buddy Epson looking constipated or passing gas every time he has to do his trick. Yes, he has a moral dilemma, but to me, Buddy Epson just seemed out of place in this episode. I can't put my finger on it. Maybe I don't like the casting of him in it. Ace was a little over the top. Just a weird episode altogether. I understand what they were trying to go for, but to me, it's another comedic episode. Not as comedy as Dingle the Strong, but at least Dingle the Strong, we knew what we was getting with that. This, I think it tried to be a drama and a comedy, and it just fell flat for me. So with that being said, out of a 10, probably giving this a 4. So that is my my rating for this episode. I didn't like it. It wasn't really a Twilight Zone twist. If you want to say that he didn't really have the powers and he faked it to bring his friend back to Kitty, whatever. My thing is, if I had that power and me and Eric were working and struggling in our jobs for that long, then maybe I wouldn't have taken so long to, hey, let's go do this and we'll stop. But I would have been the one in control, not my friend that's the gambler, and been like, here, we're set for life. We don't need to do this anymore. The power's gone. So it's just a lot of stuff that didn't make sense to me in this episode. So that's my feelings on this episode.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I just thought it was weird when he just said in that point where he just like, well, I blew a fuse, and then they just laughed about it. I mean, after he lost all that money.
I understand that. I think the point about that is the other guy is laughing like, of course it is. Like, basically, that's his luck.
Like, laugh so he doesn't cry kind of thing? Yeah,
right. Okay. That's what I think that is.
Okay, I got a question for you. Did Jimbo secretly have a crush on Kitty? Because he was always, there to support his friend and pump her up. I think he might have been slightly infatuated with her, maybe a little bit. And
yeah, I mean, I think you can draw that from the episode. But then again, if that's the case, why didn't he go after Kitty when he kicked her out and he brought that other girl in?
Yeah, and that's where I say
he could have done that.
That's where I'm saying, like, Jimbo was a really good friend because, in the end, he pretended to lose his power. In my opinion, he pretended to lose his powers. He did his friend the biggest favor ever because he realized that that's my next point, but let me back up to my questions and observations here. It says, I think very much like the last episode, Static, the main characters, they didn't get much Twilight Zone redemption. It wasn't like Ace came to his senses and was like, oh, wow, she really is important to me. I should stop and go after her without much in the way of expressing change. I guess he did get rid of the slot machine at the end, and that might be his way of kind of proving to Kitty that she's more important than gambling. So I get that. I also agree with Jimbo that there's no real Twilight Zone twist in this episode, other than he loses his powers, blah blah blah.
Allegedly, and maybe he didn't.
Yeah, and Ace loses all of his money. The moral of the story, again, is people are much more important than wealth or ill-gotten gain. And so I think there was a pretty good moral in the story. And I think it's interesting that these two friends, they come together, they have two completely different personalities. So those were just things that I noticed. If I had to rate it, I'd probably rate it 6 or 6.5. Again, I don't think it's terrible, but I don't think it's a upper echelon episode. Again, it's going to be really hard to number these episodes as we go through because there is a big chunk of these episodes that are just kind of medium, and they're going to fall right in the middle of the pack. So it's going to be hard to, rate all those middle of the pack episodes because there are so many of them that just kind of are in the middle. They don't really stand out.
I think this episode would have been a better episode for the videotape.
Yeah.
And I would have liked to seen one of the other ones that are videotaped a regular episode.
Yeah, it might have been difficult to insert that Thunder Road clip if they did a videotape because that would look way out of place. But yeah, I agree with the point that they could have probably saved money on this one because there wasn't a whole lot to it. But again, just the middle of the road. I think it's got a decent moral. I don't think that the Twilight Zone redemption was really strong with this one. But with that, I think we'll move on. Jimbo, you got any final comments? And
no. Next week, I do believe we have another videotaped episode. I think it might be the last one. It's that really creepy one with the kid talks to his dead grandma on the phone. I can't think of the
long distance call.
Long distance call. Yeah. So it might be a step up from this, but from what I remember, that I didn't really care for that episode either. So hopefully we'll get to a good one, or we're just going to be ranking the top 10 worst Twilight Zones of this season.
Yeah, it's going to get good.
Like we do at the end of the year.
It's going to get good. It's going to get good, trust me.
Going to get good. Well, it didn't have to take me 26 episodes to get good, let me just say. To me, so far, season 1's head and shoulders above this season, even with a few bright spots in this season 2, like Mr. Dingle the Strong. So I think this episode's coming close. You got anything else, Eric?
If you just give me 1 second, I can give you the preview, I think, of next week's episode.
Well, if you'd like to follow us on the social medias, we are the Tragedy of Cinema Podcast on Facebook. You can email us at thetragedyofcinema@gmail.com. If you'd like to leave us a review, we will read it on the air. You can come see us, even ADZ, yes, ADZ, Kyle, and myself at the Boone County Jail Distillery on May 20th for our live show with Hillbilly Horror Stories and those guys from Middle Aged and Creeped Out, Todd, Sean, and Nate. So hopefully you get your tickets soon. You can get tickets on our Facebook page, or if you can't find it on there, just shoot me a message on Facebook or text message. I can send you the link to buy tickets. I believe it's $25. You'll be able to take pictures and everything. So, Eric, you find it?
Yeah, I did. So, the trailer. Next week, Mr. Charles Beaumont and William Idelson deliver a story on your doorstep with the title Long Distance Call. It's a uniquely a flesh and fantasy tale involving a small boy, a toy telephone, and the incredible faith of a child. I hope you're around next week at the usual time, which, depending on where you are, varies, and in the usual place, the one that never varies, the uncharted regions of the Twilight Zone.
Bum, bum, bum.
Yeah.
All right. Until next time, I think this episode's coming to a close, and that's a wrap.
And cut.
Some people possess talent, others are possessed by it. When that happens, the talent becomes a curse. Jimbo Cobb knew, right from the beginning. But before Ace Larson learned that simple truth, he had to take a short trip through the Twilight Zone.